In this video, we'll build a responsive HTML email template from scratch. And the best way to tell if an email template is truly responsive is to simply size the window down in Gmail and see that the columns shift. And if it does that, you can be certain that the email template is going to be responsive across mobile devices as well. So what I've done is send a test email to myself on my iPhone with dark mode, as you see here on the right, to show off how the email template will appear on mobile phones with dark mode enabled. So if you'd like to learn how to build responsive HTML email templates which are dark mode friendly, be sure to stick around to the end of the tutorial. So let me show you what we'll need to get started. In the video description, I'll have a link to these tutorial starter files, which will an index.html file that I've started for us, which you can open up in your text editor. So I'm going to be using the text editor that's free called Visual Studio Code, which I'll show you how to get in just a moment. And I've also included all of the images that we'll use to build the email template. Also included in the files will be the HTML email course.html file, where you can get a preview to my full HTML email mastery course, where we design and develop for every email client, including Outlook. And of the HTML email template bonuses included in the course, we'll be designing a light version of the second template from the left that you see right here. So what I mean by light is we'll be developing certain features, and we're not going to develop for every email client, but we'll have our email template that we develop in the tutorial today display on most modern email clients. So this is the template right here that the email template design we'll be designing in the tutorial is based off of, and you can take a look for yourself to determine the different features that you can expect in the templates in the course versus the template we'll be designing in the tutorial. So back to the starter files that I'll have a link to in the video description, I'm going to open up index.html in my text editor, which, as I mentioned, is Visual Studio Code. And if you'd like to learn more about it, you can go to responsivehtmlemail.com and then the resources page, where you can see all of the extensions and links to get set up in Visual Studio Code. So now let's go back over to Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to hit the end live session, so I can hit the go live session here in Visual Studio Code, and that's going to open up this blank page in Google Chrome. And to make sure that I'm connected, I could just change the background color that's already set here to black using all zeros for the hex value. And now that we see that we're connected, let's go over everything that I've included for us inside of the starter files here to get us started building our responsive email template. So from the top of index.html, we'll start with the doc type or document type. And the doc type in HTML email is going to be XHTML 1.0 transitional. So this is still the preferred document type recommended by popular email testing services like Litmus and Email on Acid. And when we use XHTML, we'll need to include a link here to it in the HTML tag itself. Then underneath that, we have the head section, where we'll tell the browser or email client all of the important information for how we want our email template to display, starting with character type UTF-8, which is the standard character set for numbers and letters on the internet, followed by a meta tag for Microsoft Edge and Internet Explorer compatibility. Then we have viewport with device with initial scale 1 to make sure that on mobile devices our email template, which is the same with websites, displays at 100% or zoom 1 or zoom 100%. Then we have the title of the email template, which is optional, but if you're going to link to a live email template online, a title tag is recommended, similar to what you would do with a website, so you can see it in the browser, as you can see here. So next, let's cover the styling that's included for us. So inside of the head section, we're going to have an internal style sheet where we have style type, text/CSS, and then we'll also add a little bit of inline styling. So in HTML email, we'll have internal and inline CSS styling. We're not going to link to anything externally. Now let's go over the reset styling that I've included for us, starting with the body tag, and you'll notice that I've reset margin to 0 with a capital M. So when designing for Outlook, you'll want to use a capital M rather, and get in the habit of it, but we're not going to be adding conditional statements or designing for Outlook. That's going to be a much longer tutorial. You can check that out in the complete course or at responsivehtmlemail.com. So back to margin 0, what this is going to do is make sure that we have no margin off to the edges, and the same will be done with padding. Then we have the background color set to the light gray shade with the hex value. Next, we have a reset for table tags to remove any border spacing that email clients want to add to them inherently. This way we can take up the full width of the canvas for our design, and then the same will be done with table data tags, removing any padding off to the sides of our TD tags and removing any borders that email clients want to add to our images. Then we have some media queries started for us, so we'll be changing the styling once we go underneath 600 pixels in width and 400 pixels in width. So our email template is going to be 600 pixels at its full width. So as soon as we drop down underneath the full width, we'll see that our columns will start to shift. So we'll have a design basically at the 400 pixel width or underneath that that's separate from 400 to 600, and then our full width design at the 600 pixel width and any screens that are wider than that when reviewing the email template. So let's get started with our content inside of the body tag, starting with a center tag. So center tags are kind of old when it comes to HTML, but they're still valid in HTML email. And what we're going to do here is reinforce the background color and set a maximum width for the basically the wrapper of the email template canvas. So we'll give this a class called wrapper. So if you're not familiar with classes and ID elements in HTML, we have a period for classes and a hashtag for IDs. So if we just went hashtag, that's going to populate an ID for us. So center ID wrapper instead of center class wrapper. And you'll understand this more as we reference elements with our CSS using periods and hashtags. So as I mentioned, we're going to use this center element with the class wrapper to apply the background color. And this is going to set up the sort of canvas around the email template. Then inside of that, we're going to add an additional element that we'll call class outer, which will set the width of the email template outside of the table that we give it. So these elements will contain our table on smaller screen widths. So now we can add the actual table. So this is going to be for the template design itself, everything inside of this element that we add now, and it will also reinforce the width of it. So we'll start with the table tag, and then we'll give it a class called main so we can reference it in the CSS. Then I'm also going to make this aligned center, and this is going to reinforce the centering, which will also apply with CSS. This way, for desktop email clients, when we're not looking at screens 600 pixels or narrower, we'll see that our email template is centered. So now let's reference these three classes in our CSS, starting with the wrapper class. So this is going to be again for the full width and the background color. So we'll use the period to reference the wrapper class with period and then wrapper, and we'll give this a width of 100%. So it takes up 100% of our web browser and the width of whatever email client it's displaying in. And then we're going to reinforce that background color that's already set above with the hex value 6F, F9, FC. Then next, what we're going to add is something to make sure that the table element that's inside of this doesn't display outside of this center element that we've added. So no matter what the width of the screen, our table will take up 100% of the design. You might see a little 1 pixel border off to the side, which I'll show you how to add later. But for now, we're going to use a CSS property called table layout with the value of fixed to make sure that the table doesn't display outside of any parent elements. Then for the last bit of CSS, I'm going to add some spacing to the bottom of the template, which I think looks cool with the border radius that we'll add pretty late in the video, towards the end of the tutorial. So I'm going to add padding bottom and then 40 pixels. And you can customize this part as well as the background color to your own custom styling. So now let's style the outer class, which is going to contain the table, and we'll also set the background color of the table here. So we'll give it a max width of 600 pixels, which will be the width of the full width of the template design. And then we'll set the background color to all white with all F hex values. So I mentioned there's a 1 pixel border off to the side of the template to sort of make the design pop a little bit. And this is the CSS if you want to add that border off to the sides, which I didn't include in the video simply because I forgot, which is included in the completed template that we're viewing as we build the design. So now with our max width set and the background color set, we can add some content inside of the table, and we'll see that it displays, and you can kind of see the white background there displaying at 600 pixel width, sort of giving us the first outline of our email template. So even though we have that width and background color set, to make sure that email clients respect the width and the color and the centering, we're going to reference the main class that we gave our table for the main email template table. So we'll add margin 0 auto to reinforce the centering of it. Then we'll also make sure that it takes up 100% of the width inside of the outer element that's surrounding it with width 100%. And then we can also reinforce the maximum width similar to the outer tag with max width 600 pixels. And then we already added the border spacing 0, so we don't really have to add it, but I'll just do it anyways as a reminder, because late in the tutorial we'll inline the CSS where it won't make a difference anyhow. So now what we can do is add our font family, which will be the font style for the email template. So you'll see that we have a bit of a rounded font style as opposed to Times New Roman. So let's add font family, then sans serif, and then I'll add a color that's sort of a dark gray complementing the gray background color and footer for the template. And once we've added that, I'm going to get rid of the text that we see here, the test text, so we can get started with the first bit of our template content, which is the social media bar at the very top. So each section of the template will have its own table row. So if you're not familiar with the order of table elements, it starts with the table, then we have a table row, and inside of that we have a table data tag. So each table row, which will go inside of the table tag, which we already have set up for the main table, will take up 100% of the width of the email template. Then inside of that we'll have our table data tag, which we already added the padding 0 styling for, and that's really important when it comes to designing email templates. You want to make sure that there's no padding to that first table data tag inside of your table row, and then we'll have an additional table tag inside of that, which will set up the content. So I'll cover when this additional table tag inside of the table data tag is needed in just a moment. For this table tag though, in addition to any other table tags that we add inside of the main table, we'll want to make sure that the width takes up 100%, and we're going to do that with the attribute called width, and we'll give it a value of 100%. So the reason for this inner table is so we can apply padding to the next table data tag, which will add padding to the top and bottom of our social media images. So adding this padding to the first table data tag wouldn't be respected by email clients. So we'll have to do it inside of an additional table and table row before we get to that table data tag. So we'll add tr, then td, and now for this td I'll add the style attribute, and I'm going to apply the background color first for the blue shade. So to get the hex value for that, I'll use my Google Chrome color picker extension and then select it. And the hex value will be 378 BDA for the blue background color. Then I'll add the padding to the table data tag, and I'm going to use 10 pixels all around, so that'll cover the top and bottom and the left and right, but we'll just need it for the top bottom. Then we'll also use text align center to center our images because they're going to be wrapped in links or the anchor text tag with the A tag, which will act as text so we can center the images that way. So now if we take a look at the version we're working on, we'll be able to see the 10 pixel padding taking up 20 pixels total, showing the blue background, and we're ready to add the social media icons now with the images. So let's add some space here in between our table data tags and start off with the anchor text A tag. And so we can add some styling in the form of spacing around the images. I'm going to add an additional class here called social. And inside of that social link tag, we'll have an image. And if you're really good with your text editor, you can do an asterisk times 5 here. But I'm just going to end up pasting these out. So for our social media link, once I hit enter, you can add, for example, facebook.com. So https://facebook.com and link to whatever page you want per social media network. But I'm just going to add a hashtag for all of the links here to keep them simple and uniform. So now for the image source link, if we go into the image folder, that is going to be white-facebook.png. So we'll need to go into the img folder with img. So we just click that and then we go down to the image, and we'll need to do that same thing when we reference it in the HTML, basically going into the folder before we get to the image file. So we'll go img/ and then the image file, which is white-facebook.png. And now if we save it or save automatically, we can see that we have the Facebook image, but it's displaying kind of large. So I'm going to resize that with a width attribute like we used previously with width 100%. And you can resize this to whatever size you want. I'm going to go with 30 pixels. And once that's set, to add the other images, I'll just copy this and paste it in 4 times. Then all we'll need to do is change the images to fit the different social media networks. So we have Twitter next, and then we have YouTube after that, then LinkedIn, and then the last one is Instagram. Okay, so there we have it, but as you can see, they're a little bit closer together. So what we'll do is use that social class that we added in the CSS so we can add some padding to the right of each social icon. So I'll add social and then padding right 5 pixels. So once that's saved, if we take a look and go back and forth between the version we're working on and the finished version, we're not going to be able to tell a difference, but you can always adjust the padding to the spacing that you want and make it different from this design. Now let's move on to adding the logo image, which will have a similar setup to what we did with the social media icons, in that we're going to have an inner table because we want to be able to add some spacing to the table data tag inside of it. So you can copy this HTML if you wish. I'm going to drop down underneath the table row tag and start a new with a new table row, table data, and table tag. And then once we have our table set, we're going to add that same width attribute to give it a width of 100%. And then I'll add some spacing here so we can start our new table row and table data tag, which will have the style attribute. So similar to the social icons, we're going to add some padding around the logo. So I'll add style, then padding 10 pixels all around, and our logo will be wrapped in a link as well. So we can use text align center to center it without any additional styling. And inside of this, we can add our anchor text tag, or A, with the image tag inside of it for image. And I'm going to leave the link blank with the hashtag. Then we can add our image source. So that's going to be img/w3newbie.png. So now if we take a look at it, we'll have the image displaying, but we'll need to resize it similar to the social icon. So I'm going to add the width attribute and give it a width of 180 pixels. And that looks a lot better. So now we have the option to add alternative text. So for example, if the image doesn't display, we'll see that it says logo as the alternative text. And you might see that in an email if somebody doesn't have their images enabled. Then we can also add a title. So I'll add logo here as well. And then if we hover over the image, you'll see the logo text appear. So that's all we'll need to do for the logo design. And next, for the banner image, this is the first section aside from some borders where we're not going to need the 2 layers of table row and table data tags. So we're not going to need any styling around the image in the table data tag aside from the padding 0 that's set in the internal style sheet at the top of the document. So all we'll need here is a table row tag, table data, then we can add our link and the image inside of the link. And then I'll just drop the link and the image down to a new line here and make the link blank. And then the image here is going to be img/1200 times 700. So 1200 because it's 600 times 2. And then I'm going to give it a width of 600 or 600 pixels to take up the full width of the template. So now if we take a look in Chrome, we have the banner image displaying good at full width, but if we size it down, we'll see that the template itself isn't going to resize anymore. So we'll need to give it a max width of 100% in our styling. That way it's never wider than the template itself. And now we'll size down to any width underneath the 600 pixel mark. So now let's move on to the 3-column section that appears underneath the banner image. And this is where our tables are going to start to get a little bit more layered. So we'll start it off similar to how we started the sections where we have inner content and styling with the TR, TD, and table. And then inside of that, we're going to have some different classes for the columns, as well as the spacing and content that appears inside of them. So let's move on to underneath the banner image. And as I said, we'll start off with a table row, table data, and table tag. Then I'm going to give this table right here its width of 100%. Then inside of this table, instead of having a table row and table data tag that has the padding, we're going to give this table data tag a class called 3columns for each one of the 3 columns. And then inside of this, we'll have a new table for each column. So I'll say 3 columns, and then I'll hit enter and create a little bit of space. And now we can add a new table that will give the class called column. Then inside of this, we'll have a new table row, which will contain a table data tag for the padding that we add around each section. So I'll add td.padding. And this is basically the equivalent of what we did in the logo and social media sections. Instead of doing inline padding styling, we'll use a class to reference it in our internal style sheet. Then we'll add one more table for the content, and we're just going to give this a class called content. So table.content. And then each table row inside of this will contain a bit of our content, so the image and the text. So we'll start off with an image, and then we'll do the text and the link underneath that in a new table row. So this is going to be similar to the images we added previously. I'll add the A tag and then the image inside of it. Then you might remember our images are going to resize on mobile devices, so we'll need to add a class that we can change the styling on smaller devices for that, which we'll reference in the CSS later. So I'm going to give this a class called third-image after the img tag. Then once I hit enter, I'm going to leave the link blank again with a hashtag, and then the image here will be img/380 times 280.jpg for the watch image, or the first watch image, that is. And then after this, we can check out the image in our template, and we'll need to resize it similar to what we did with the previous images. So let's again add our width attribute, and I'm going to give it a width of 150 pixels. Now this is going to give us 25 pixels on either side inside of the 200 pixel 3-column layout within 600 pixels, and later we'll take away 25 pixels on either side so the image can display at 200 pixels on mobile devices. For now though, we'll need to give it a maximum width so it doesn't span outside of our content table. So we'll give it a max width of 150 pixels, and later we'll change this in our internal style sheet to 200, as I just mentioned. So now we can add the text content that appears underneath the image. So we're going to use paragraph text where it says Apple Watch, but first we'll add the new table row and table data tag. And then for this table data tag, I'm going to add some padding all around our text content and link with padding 10 pixels all around. And then once we've done that, we can drop down in between our table data tags to start with our paragraph content for where it says Apple Watch. So we'll use the P tag for paragraph. Then I'll add the Apple Watch text inside of the paragraph tag, and I'll do it in all caps here. You can always use text transform uppercase to achieve this in the CSS. Then to match the finished version, I'm going to make this text bold and add some spacing around it. So let's go with font weight bold, and I'll make it, actually rather than add the space, we're not going to need that. I'll just increase the size here to font size 17 pixels. And then later we'll resize the paragraph text that appears underneath it. But let's add that now. So I'm going to copy this. You can always do ipsum text in your text editor. Just type in ipsum for text to fill out. Then beneath this paragraph text, we can simply add an A or anchor text tag for the learn more ... text. So learn more ... And now if we save it or have it saved automatically, we'll see that we have the text and the learn more link, but the text is spanning outside of the table for now. So we'll correct that when we get to the CSS. But before we do that, let's add the HTML for the other two columns. So now that we have the first one filled out, what we can do is simply copy our HTML and save some time because it's all going to be the same except for the content with the image and the text. So just copy it from the table class column and down. Just make sure that you line it up with your text editor indentation. So now we should have all three columns displaying underneath one another, and we can change the content inside of it. So we'll change Apple Watch to earpods for the third one. And then I'm going to change this to watch bands. And then we can also change the images. So the image for the second one is going to be -3 instead of -2, and the third one will be -2. So -3 and then -2. And now we have all of our content matching. So similar to what we've been doing in the previous sections, let's add our CSS for the 3-column layout before we move on to the blue borders and the footer of the email template design. So in our internal style sheet, we're going to be styling the different classes that we've added, starting with 3 columns, then column, padding, and content, in addition to the classes for the images. And I actually forgot one class, so we'll want to make the third column a different class here. We're going to do third image -last because that third image is going to increase in size before the other ones do. It's going to increase in size underneath 600 pixels instead of 400 pixels like the other. So we'll say third image -last for this one. So we can apply different CSS to the third column than the first two. So back to the CSS, let's start off with that 3 columns class that I just referenced. And once we've added the class, the first thing that I'm going to do is add text align center. So this is going to align all of our content center because you might remember that our image is included inside of a link just like the other images. And then once we've done this, I'm going to add some padding to the top of the 3-column section itself to separate it from the banner image with 40 pixels. And then on the bottom, I'll add 30 pixels of padding, which will separate it from the blue border that we'll be adding that goes on top of the footer section. Now next, I'm going to add a bit of styling here that I'll explain later, and I'm going to put it inside of CSS comments so it doesn't apply, and that's font size 0. So as I said, I'll explain this later because it's going to make more sense after we've added other styling, and I'll come back to it. So now let's move on to styling the column that appears inside of the 3-column section. So for reference, we can add the column class by itself, since we're not going to be using it in any other instances than how we're using it here. But if you wanted to use it in other places, you would add 3columns.column to make sure that it only targets that class itself. So now the first bit of styling that I'll add here is width 100%. So it takes up 100% of the table, and then we'll also give it a maximum width of 200 pixels. So each column will take up 1/3 of the 600 pixel layout. And to get them displaying next to one another, we're going to add display inline block. So instead of display block, we'll use inline dash block. Then the last bit of styling is going to be called vertical align top. So this is going to allow our tables to display inline next to one another and then stack on top of one another on smaller screens. But as you can see, they're not displaying next to one another in the 600 pixel layout, but each column is taking up 200 pixels. So the reason for this is because font size is inherently added to table data tags inside of tables. So if we remove the CSS comment, now we have them displaying inline next to one another, but it also removed our text where we didn't add a font size. So we'll bring our text back in a little bit. First, let's add our padding using the padding class that we added so we can get them separated and having similar space in between them. So we'll reference that padding class underneath the column class. And I'm going to give this a padding of 15 pixels all around. So once it's saved, if we take a look, we'll have equal spacing, sort of. It's not completely equal, but it will equal out once we add our text back. So let's add that text by targeting the content class that we added underneath the padding class. So I'll add content, and then I'm going to make the text 15 pixels in size with font size 15 pixels, which is 1 pixel beneath the inherent 16 pixels in Google Chrome. And then I'm also going to increase the line height to 20 pixels with line height 20 pixels to separate our paragraph text a bit. Then the last bit of styling that we'll add here will be for the link that appears underneath the paragraph text. So let's target the anchor text tag, and we can just use the A tag since this is the only link that we'll target. And if you want, you can add a class. And I'm just going to show you a trick real quick. If you want to turn this into a button, for example, we can just add a class called BTN. And then I'll show you, if we just reference that BTN class, I'll show you how to turn a link into a button. So we would just add padding and add padding to the top and bottom. So 10 pixels top bottom, 20 pixels left right, and then apply a background color. So I'll use a blue hex value that was used in the header or the social media section, then change the color of the text to white, and then remove the underline with text decoration none. And we can also add some border radius. So I'll add border radius 5 pixels. There we have a button displaying underneath there instead of a link. So now I'm going to go back to matching it up with the finished version. So I'll remove the border radius and the background color and padding, and just change this to A for the anchor text tag. And then I'll change the color to that blue hex value that we used for the header. And lastly, I'll increase the font size back to 16 pixels because it's going to be 15 pixels without doing this. Okay, so now once it's saved, we should be matching up to the finished version down to that point, and we can't tell the difference when I hover back and forth unless we see the footer content displaying underneath. So later in the video, we'll come back to the media queries here to make our 3-column section responsive, but first let's add the footer content. So just make sure that you're matched up in your text editor after the last main table row inside of our table, and then we'll add the blue border that first appears above the footer. So we'll do that with the table row and table data tag. Then we won't need any spacing around this section, so we can just add our styling right inside of this table data tag with style and then background color. And I'll use that same blue hex value 378BDA. And then instead of using padding, we can use height here. So I'll add height 10 pixels or 10. So now if we save it and take a look, there we have our blue border displaying at the bottom of the template. So next let's add the gray section that includes the footer content. So this section will be somewhat similar to the header and logo section, starting it off with a table row and table data tag, except for in this section we're going to add some background color styling directly to this first table data tag with the hex value EF, which gives us the light gray shade. And then inside of this we'll have a table, and again we'll use the width attribute, giving it the value of 100%. And then inside of this we can add some spacing to add our table row and table data tag for the content. So for this table data tag, this will be kind of similar to the logo and images. We're going to add some spacing here to the top and bottom and left and right. So I'll add padding of 20 pixels all around, and then text align center. And then I'm actually going to reduce the padding only for the bottom from 20 pixels to 10 pixels because I think we'll be adding our own spacing to that unsubscribe link. But we'll come back to that spacing in a little bit after we've added the content inside of this table data tag. So let's start off with the logo first, which is going to be similar to the logo we added in the header. We'll use a link around it with the A tag followed by the image. And I'll leave the link here blank. And for this image, it's going to be img/, and it's going to be w3newbie.png again. I think I included the white version by mistake for another template. Then for this image, I'm going to change the width so it doesn't display at the full width using the width attribute and 160 pixels. Okay, so now we're ready to add the paragraph text that appears underneath it, starting with the W3Newbie HTML email, which is my other website aside from responsivehtmlemail.com. And for this paragraph text, you can specify the font size. So I'm going to use font size 16 pixels, which is inherent. And then I'll add some spacing to the top with margin top 18 pixels. And then I'll separate the text that appears underneath it with margin bottom 10 pixels. And as a reminder, if you were designing for Outlook, which we're not because we're not using conditional statements here, we would add capital M's to margin. So once that's set, for the second bit of paragraph text, we're going to use the same exact styling. So we can simply copy this tag and add our new text. So I'll simply copy this paragraph text, or tag rather, and then copy this text here and paste it in. You can once again type in your own content or use Ipsum text. Now for the email address and link, we'll use a paragraph tag and then an anchor text tag inside of that. And email links are mail to and then colon followed by the email you want to have the mail sent to. So email@email.com, and then we can enter the email address text here, which will appear as a link. So when somebody clicks on that, it's going to prompt them to send an email depending on what program they have set up for default. Then for the phone number, we'll do something similar in that we'll use a telephone link. So TEL:, then the phone number, and of course the phone number that we want to appear as the link. So now the last bit of content in the footer section will be the unsubscribe link that appears underneath the phone number. So to add that, I'm going to grab the paragraph text for the street address because it has the margin on the top and bottom for the extra spacing. And then what I'll do is I'm going to reduce the font size here. And I'm going to change this text that's inside of here to a link. And I'll just leave it blank. And then you can write unsubscribe or subscribe. So now if I save it and check it out in Chrome, there's the subscribe text. And I'll just add a little bit more spacing around it. And the font size here isn't changing. I think in the original I had it in a different table row and table data tag, but that's all right. So you can adjust that as you wish, but I'm going to move on to the blue border that appears at the very bottom now. So this is going to be similar to the last border we added. So we can just copy that HTML and paste it underneath. Then I'm going to increase the height to 20. And once we've done that, we'll see that it displays, but we don't have the border radius. So let's add the rounded corners on the bottom left and bottom right. So to do that, we'll use border radius, and then the values 0, 0, then 15 pixels, which will be more than the button that we did with 5 pixels. So it'll be a little bit more of a wider rounded edge. So now if we look, we'll have the bottom right done, and then if we add it again, we'll have the bottom left. So this is a little different from the box model with CSS. The box model goes top right, bottom left, but with border, we go top left, top right, bottom left, as you can see here. So with that, we have all of our HTML and CSS completed for the full width version of the template at 600 pixels. So now we can focus on the media queries for when the template decreased in width underneath 600 and 400 pixels. So I'll add the completed template to the left and our version on the right. So we'll find that the images aren't displaying at 200 pixels, they're still at 150. And as I mentioned previously, underneath 600 pixels, we'll have the last image changed to 200 pixels. First though, let's target the third image class for the first two images, taking them from 150 to 200 pixels. So that'll go inside of the 400 pixel media query for screen widths underneath that, with img and then the class third-image. So img.third-img, and then I'll add width 200 pixels, and then we'll also change the maximum width to 200 pixels from 150, which was added inline in the image CSS. So now in order to get this CSS to override our inline CSS, which we added with the 150 width and 150 pixel max width, so we can take up all that space, we'll need to add exclamation point important to both the max width and the regular width. So now our first two images will be displaying at 200 pixels, but our last one will still be at 150. So let's make the third image change to 200 pixels underneath 600 pixels now. And we can do that by simply copying the CSS and applying it to the 600 pixel media query for screen widths underneath that point. And I'll just add dash last here. So now we have that one changing to 200 pixels before the other ones do, but you'll notice that this isn't exactly even. So there's going to be a little bit more space off to the left, and that's because the padding that we added with the padding class is still being applied even though we don't need it because the image is taking up the full width of the column. So what we'll do is we'll target that padding class we added previously and remove the padding to the left with padding left 0, and then exclamation point important to override the previous padding, and the same with padding right with 0, exclamation point important. Okay, so with that CSS, if we check out our version compared to the original version, we're not going to be able to tell the difference because we have the two different breakpoints where our images and columns are resizing for mobile devices. So now what we'll do for the rest of the tutorial is I want to show you how you can send a test email to yourself with your email template, but we'll need to have these images live online. So I'm going to give you a resource in just a moment. And I should mention, inside of my course that I referenced earlier, all of these images, in addition to every image that is used with all of the templates, are uploaded live to the internet, so you can send the emails without having to put the images online already. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a resource. So if you go to imgbb.com, you can upload your images there, which is free image hosting. So you can link to, that way you'll be able to see your emails in the email box for testing. Or you can simply temporarily replace the images that you have with the placeholder images. So if you go to placeholder.com, you can see the direct links to replace your images with placeholder images simply for testing purposes. Then once your images are online or you have the placeholder images, just go to putsmail.com, and this is where you can send free test emails with your email templates to your own email addresses. You will have to create a free account though, which I already have set up here. Then once you have your account set up, hit create a new test email, and then you can add the email addresses that you want to send your tests to and add your subject line. And then what we'll do is we'll copy all of the HTML and CSS inside of index.html. So I'll select all and copy it. Just make sure, again, you're using the live image links, which I'm going to replace these with for my testing in just a moment. Then hit move your CSS in line, check off that you're not a robot, and send the email to your own email addresses. So once you've done that, you can check out your email inbox like I have here, as I demonstrated at the beginning of the tutorial. And to know that our email template is truly responsive, we can size the window down in the Gmail window and see that the columns shift to go on top of one another. So that concludes the complete responsive HTML email template tutorial. Please remember to like this video, subscribe, and turn on your notifications for the next video. Also, check out my course in the video description. Thanks for watching.